My name is Father Emmanuel. I was a priest, a quiet man of liturgy and light, of sacraments and silence. But what I am now, what I became after the flood, is something I never prepared for in seminary. Something no cassock, no rosary, no doctrine could explain. I died. Not metaphorically. Not in some poetic sense. I drowned beneath the rising waters of Texas, and my breath left me. The storm came like a thief in the night, devouring homes, splintering pews, baptizing cities in fear. I was in the sanctuary when it happened, the old chapel groaning under the pressure of a world turned wild. The crucifix above the altar trembled. The candles flickered, then went black. And then the flood came in. Not through the windows, but through the bones of the building. Through the foundation. Through the soul of the town. It was as if God had stopped restraining something ancient, something long held. I remember the icy water dragging me down the nave like a body with no name. I remember the sensation of silence folding over my ears. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the end of my watch. And then, I left. I left the body. I left the chapel. I left the noise and the flesh and the memory of time. I floated upward like a page torn from a sacred book, carried not by wind but by mercy. I looked down and saw myself, a soaked, lifeless shell in a collar I no longer needed. And in that moment I knew, this was not a dream. This was not delusion. This was not some chemical flicker of a dying brain. This was judgment. Not wrath, but truth. And I was being summoned. What I saw on the other side, what Jesus showed me in that terrible glory, has left me unable to sleep for weeks at a time. Because America is standing on the edge of something irreversible, something final, something holy. And what is coming will not wait for your approval. It will not wait for your theology. It will not wait for your permission. This testimony is not a warning. It is a mirror. It will show you who you are. It will show you what's been growing beneath your feet while you sang. It will show you what is coming next, whether you want to see it or not. Even now my hands tremble. Even now I'm afraid to speak it. But I must, because he called my name in the dark. And I made a vow. If I lived, if I was sent back, I would not be silent. So I speak. And you must choose. The time is now. Choose. Before the flood, before the veil lifted, before my lungs filled with water, there was routine. I was a parish priest in a small Texas town that time forgot but God remembered. A place where people still brought pecan pies after funerals, where children knelt without being told, where the bell tower sang louder than the local politics. Every morning I would rise before the sun, still half dreaming of psalms. The rectory was always cold at that hour, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels like a prayer. I would light a candle in the chapel, the same candle I had lit for 16 years, and whisper the prayers of lauds as dew clung to the windows like breath on glass. There was comfort in it. There was order. There was peace, or at least the shape of peace. I walked the same streets daily, collar turned up against the wind, a leather Bible pressed against my ribs like armor. I knew every creaking floorboard in the sacristy. I knew which confessional curtain was stubborn. I knew which widow always left $2 more than she could afford in the offering plate. I knew my people. I knew their secrets because they whispered them to me through latticed wood. I held their grief. I anointed their dying. I baptized their babies. I buried their fathers. But if I'm honest, truly honest, something had gone missing in me. I could still feel the movements of the liturgy, but they no longer moved me. I could still preach, but the fire behind the words had cooled into embers. I heard their confessions, but my soul was too quiet, too still, as though I had forgotten how to bleed. It was a sacred numbness, the kind only priests understand. The slow erosion of awe. The gradual decay of trembling before the presence. I loved my people. But I feared I was no longer leading them toward a God I still knew intimately. I feared I was simply preserving something holy, not becoming holy myself. And on some nights, when the wind howled outside the stained glass, I would sit alone in the chapel and wonder, have I lost him in the repetition? Have I buried the living God beneath the bones of ritual? Have I mistaken the motions for the man? But I said nothing. Because priests don't confess in public. Because the shepherd doesn't weep in front of the sheep. Because weakness in the eyes of the parish is scandalous, even when it's sacred. I knew something was changing. Not just in me, but in the air. The skies over Texas that week were heavy. Not just with rain but with waiting. Even the birds flew strangely. The wind shifted often. It was as if the whole earth had taken a breath and was holding it, waiting to exhale judgment. I remember that final Sunday clearly. The pews were half full. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and old hymn books. Mrs. Claiborne brought her usual cough and peppermint perfume. The choir was off-key as always, but it comforted me. Predictability is its own kind of prayer. And yet, I couldn't shake the sense that the walls were listening. Every creak of the church door startled me more than it should have. The candles seemed to flicker in patterns. The stained glass of Christ on the cross shimmered as though something behind it stirred. I stood behind the pulpit and tried to speak, but the words felt foreign. "Repent and believe in the gospel," I said. But it sounded like someone else had said it. As if the walls themselves had spoken through me. As if he was already near. Too near. The air was electric. Pregnant with consequence. And yet we went on. Like we always did. We sang. We shook hands. We drank coffee in the fellowship hall. We made jokes about the weather. No one knew that this would be the last time we would gather whole. No one knew the water was already rising. No one knew that heaven had already issued the summons. But something in me did know. A whisper I could not silence. He called my name in the dark. And I was already beginning to answer. Return to the fire. One moment I was standing in the hallway of the rectory, watching the rain thread down the old stained glass windows like tears over a painted saint. The next, I was clinging to the frame of my office window, my knuckles white, my breath ragged, the cold biting through my cassock like needles of judgment. The waters came without permission. Not like a gentle baptism, but like a violent exorcism. The earth convulsed. The walls cracked. The pews floated like coffins in a dark procession. The sanctuary I had tended like a garden of souls was drowning. I remember the roar. Not just the sound of the water, but the groaning of the ground itself, as though creation remembered something terrible. The flood was not just physical, it was prophetic. A cleansing, a reckoning. I held on to that window for as long as my body could bear it. My fingers numb, my arms trembling, the bones in my back screaming. I saw the crucifix fall from the wall. I saw candles extinguished without ceremony. I saw a child's drawing, left behind after Sunday school, float past my knees, soaked and smudged as if innocence itself had been washed away. And then, I let go. Or perhaps the water pried me loose. Perhaps heaven did. Perhaps the time of clinging had passed. And suddenly, I was weightless. No pain. No panic. Only a strange stillness, like being carried in the womb of silence. The sensation of drowning is not what I expected. It was not fire, but surrender. It was not screaming, but fading. My last breath left my body like incense. My last heartbeat slowed until it was only a whisper against eternity. The cold no longer hurt. It cradled me. Time slipped its hands from around my neck. I did not black out. I expanded. My consciousness lifted, slow and solemn. Not like a dream, but like being peeled from skin. I rose above the room. Above the drowning altar. Above the steeple that once pointed men to heaven but now bowed under brown, rising flood water. I saw myself, face pale, mouth slack, eyes closed in unnatural peace, and I did not feel fear. I felt release. I watched myself fade from the world, and the world did not resist me. It was not as I had imagined death would be. There were no screams, no flashes, only a quietness so profound it seemed to pulse. I hovered above the rectory, then above the street. I saw rooftops torn like paper, cars bobbing like dead fish, a woman's Bible floating open, its pages unreadable, yet sacred. I saw it all, and somehow, I understood. The flood was more than a storm. It was a symbol, a sign, a holy interruption. And then, I rose higher, not by choice, not by will, but as one summoned. The sky bent around me like a veil being drawn back. The clouds parted, not because the wind moved them, but because something holy stepped through them. Light did not shine, it called. It sang in tones deeper than thunder, softer than weeping. And I knew. He called my name in the dark, and I was answering. The sensation of being severed from the body was not painful. It was holy. It was memory rediscovered, like returning to a truth too old to name. I rose higher still. I saw the steeple beneath the water, its cross now submerged, not defeated, but baptized. I saw the streets of the town, empty, echoing, as if they too had heard the summons. And somewhere beneath me my body lay still, but I was awake, more awake than I had ever been. And yet, this was only the beginning. Return to the fire. He called my name in the dark, and I answered. I rose beyond the floodwaters, beyond sound, beyond pain, beyond the skin that once held me. And what came next? No words are large enough, no breath deep enough. No priest ever prepared me for what waited on the other side of dying. It was not a place, it was a presence. A tunnel appeared, but it wasn't carved by stone or time. It was made of singing. Yes, singing. Voices, thousands of them, layered and flowing, woven like golden fabric into a path of light. Not like a choir. No, like creation itself was harmonizing. Like the stars had tongues. Like memory had a melody. The tunnel drew me, but it did not pull. It invited. It welcomed. And the moment I entered, I wept. Not with sadness. Not even with joy. But with the sheer unbearable weight of peace. It was so full, so infinite that my soul broke open. Their time had no spine. Everything stood still and flowed forward all at once. It was like standing in a single drop of water and yet seeing the entire ocean inside it. Light surrounded me, but it did not shine. It embraced. It knew me. And I knew it back, in that ancient, aching way you know something you've forgotten since before your first breath. I floated through that tunnel, and on either side, souls. Young. Some with faces I recognized. Some with no faces at all, just presence. They watched me. Some smiled. Some wept. Some placed their hand over their heart as I passed. There were no words, but the silence spoke, and I understood. These were witnesses, not of my death, but of my becoming. The air, or whatever it was that made up that atmosphere, was alive with memory, not just mine, ours. It was as though every moment of love, every whisper of worship, every hidden sacrifice, had been caught, preserved, and hung like starlight along the edges of that path. And I saw a memory I had buried. A little boy, me, kneeling alone at the altar after Mass, 7 years old, hands trembling, whispering, Jesus, use me. That moment returned to me, not as a thought, but as a place. And I heard the echo rise through the tunnel. You were brought here to remember. You were brought here to remember. It rang in me. It reawakened me. It peeled away the years of routine, robes, responsibilities, until only the child remained. The one who believed. The one who burned. I looked to my left and saw a man who had died in my parish 15 years earlier. He didn't speak, but his eyes said, you made it. And then, he faded into light. Further down, I passed a woman whose funeral I had performed during the pandemic. She was smiling, surrounded by colors I had no names for. She placed her hand on her chest and bowed her head as I drifted past. It was holy. It was reverent. It was home. And yet I knew. I wasn't staying. This place, this realm, was not my destination. It was the threshold, the unveiling, the washing away of illusion. The tunnel began to open, widening like a mouth ready to speak, and I felt it again. That sacred pull, not of gravity, but of remembrance. A voice beneath all the other voices. A whisper beneath the music. A calling so pure it made my spirit tremble. He called my name in the dark, and even now, he was still calling. Not to judge, not to scold, but to awaken. I was not brought here for comfort. I was brought here for clarity, because the hour was near. The veil was thinning, and soon, very soon, truth would break into this world like light into a locked room, and nothing would ever be the same. You were brought here to remember. You were brought here to remember. Return to the fire. And then, the light broke open, not like a flash, not like lightning, but like a veil being torn from the inside out. The tunnel dissolved into stillness and I stood, if standing is even the word, on something that felt less like ground and more like presence. It held me, not beneath my feet but within my being. I was no longer floating. I was beheld. The atmosphere thickened, not with fog but with glory so weighty I could barely endure it. Every fiber of what I was trembled in reverence. I knew without a word, without a sign, that I was no longer alone. And then I saw him, not from a distance, not imagined, not hinted at in song or symbol. I saw Jesus, and everything I thought I believed crumbled at the sight of him. He was light upon light, not glowing but radiating, with a love so ancient it hurt to look at, and a holiness so pure it made my soul ache for cleansing. His robe was white, but not the white of linen or silk. It was the white of eternity, the white of thunder made still, the white of righteousness distilled into form. His eyes, they held time, they held mercy, they held me, and in his gaze, I was undone. He did not accuse, he did not ask questions. He didn't have to, because the moment he looked at me, I saw everything I ever did, every sermon I preached in pride, every soul I passed without compassion, every truth I watered down for applause. Every night I sat in the chapel and felt nothing but refused to admit it. It all came up not in shame, but in truth, and he stood there, not recoiling, not disappointed, but waiting for me to see what he already knew, waiting for me to recognize the space between the priest I was and the son I was meant to become. He stepped closer. His steps made no sound, but they echoed in me like prophecy. And then he spoke, not with lips, not with volume, but with knowing. The words weren't heard, they were received. You have been faithful, but not fearless. The sentence hit me like a bell tolling deep in the bones. Not a rebuke, but a diagnosis, an invitation. And then again, gently, firmly, eternally, come. I must show you what's to come. He did not ask, he did not plead, he did not command. He invited, and something in me, something old and buried and priestly, rose. I followed, not because I wanted to, not because I understood, but because I was made to follow him. It was like returning to the garden I never walked, like being called home to a house I forgot was mine. He moved and the world around him changed. Where he stepped, colors bloomed. Landscapes unfolded as if time bowed to his pace. Galaxies swirled beneath his feet like dust stirred by divinity. And I wept as I followed. Not because I was afraid, but because I had never known I was this known. Because I had never seen love carried like that, so weightless and yet so crushing. He called my name in the dark. And now, in the radiance of his gaze, I remembered who I was. Not a priest, not a preacher, not a man of cloth, but a son, a witness, a voice shaped by vow. And still I followed, into what I did not know, into a vision not for me, but for you, for a nation, for a world asleep in its comfort. I followed not with feet but with surrender, because in his presence there is no walking, there is only yes, return to the fire. He called my name in the dark, and I answered, you must answer too. He led me deeper, not into a place but into a knowing, a realm of unveiling where truth stood naked without apology, where lies collapsed like ash under holy breath. I did not walk, I beheld, and what I was shown burns in me still. A great canvas unfolded before us, not painted but living. It pulsed with the heartbeat of nations, etched in light and shadow, woven with the choices of men. It was the spiritual map of America, not the map found in textbooks or war rooms, but the map seen by heaven, a topography of souls, a cartography of covenants broken and still offered. I saw the cities first, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, but they were not lit with glory. They were dimmed, darkened by pride, choked with self-worship and noise. And then I saw the smaller places, the rural towns, the fields where grandmothers prayed in secret, where the names of Jesus still carried weight. These places wept, not with water but with blood, blood in the soil, blood in the air, blood that had a voice that cried, we remember. And above it all I saw churches, so many churches, more than I could count. Their steeples reached upward like arms, but their altars, I saw altars built not to Christ, but to comfort, to safety, to ego, to prosperity dressed in Christian phrases. The pews were filled but hollow. The pulpits burned but gave no warmth. Smoke rose from sermons that tickled ears but never touched bone. And I heard the Spirit whisper through the flame, the church has lost its first love. My heart cracked, because I knew it was true. I had lived in it. I had preached in it. I had made peace with it. And the Lord, He let me see more. Pastors who no longer prayed, only performed. Congregations who no longer repented, only consumed. Altars where no one wept. Fonts where no one was truly washed. I saw movements and revivals, started in truth, but poisoned by platform. I saw truth, chained, gagged, made to wear a smile. I saw holiness, mocked in the name of relevance. I saw men and women selling revelation for influence, trading anointing for applause. And then I heard him again, not angry, not disappointed, but wounded. They pray for blessing, he said, but not for my will. They want heaven without sacrifice. And in that moment I felt the ache of Christ, the sorrow of a groom watching his bride flirt with the world. He showed me places that still burned with purity, small fellowships, hidden corners, believers with no names on earth but renown in heaven. I saw an elderly black woman in a kitchen, knees worn, voice cracked, praying for revival no one else believed would come. Heaven recorded every syllable. She glowed like fire in that realm. I saw a teenage boy refusing to compromise in a school filled with seduction. He trembled with fear, but he stood, and angels surrounded him like a shield. I saw prisoners lifting holy hands in dark cells, free in the spirit while the free remained bound by convenience. And I wept, because the remnant was still alive, scattered, small, but burning. Jesus looked at me, not with condemnation, but with commission. I understood without words. The time of passive Christianity is over. The shaking has begun. And then he raised his hand. The vision expanded. Waves of change sweeping across the nation. Pulpits crumbling. Platforms falling. Glory returning to the secret places. And I heard again from deep within the light. The truth must be told. The truth must be told. Not sold. Not polished. Not edited for mass approval. Told. Told with trembling lips. Told in tears and truth. Told even when it costs everything. He called my name in the dark. And now I knew why. Because what is coming is not soft. It is not easy. But it is holy. And I was chosen. Not to predict it, but to prepare you for it. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. And then he lifted his hand again. And what I saw next still burns behind my eyes like a second sun. Not because it was terrifying, but because it was beautiful in a way this world has forgotten. Because it was the beginning of return. The map of America changed before me. The shadows that once cloaked her cities began to crack. Thin fractures of light seeping through old strongholds, like morning breaking through boarded windows. I saw the youth first, not the ones in pulpits, not the ones with polished ministries or polished shoes. No, these were wild-eyed, barefoot, eyes swollen from tears and fasting. They gathered in alleyways and abandoned warehouses, under broken street lamps and leaking roofs. They didn't come for lights. They didn't come for sermons. They came because their souls were starving, and the world's noise had left them empty. Some clutched Bibles so worn they could barely hold together. Some held hands. Some held nothing but their own shaking hearts. But they knew. They knew this was not a movement. It was a mourning. It was repentance wrapped in fire. And from their eyes, rivers flowed. Tears not of emotion, but of remembrance. Of realizing they had forgotten their Maker. Of feeling him call them back from the edge. They were chosen. Not because they were pure. Not because they were ready. But because they answered. I saw old churches collapse. Brick and mortar falling like sandcastles in a rising tide. Steeples snapping. Signs tumbling. But beneath the rubble, the fire was not gone. It had only gone deeper. I saw fires lighting up basements, barns, prison cells, hospital rooms. Not literal fires, but the kind that turn hearts to ash and raise remnant souls from the soot. Jesus looked again, and I heard him say, not with thunder, but with that same unshakable stillness, from the ashes, I will awaken a bride who walks without fear. I saw that bride, not dressed in lace or linen, but in humility, trembling with power. She had no microphone. She had no stage. But when she spoke, the earth responded. She walked through riots with eyes like peace. She laid hands on the sick in gas stations. She preached to demons in government halls. She whispered hope into the ears of the suicidal. She was not trying to be famous. She was trying to be faithful. And the heavens rejoiced over her like a groom over his bride. I saw underground gatherings, not hidden out of fear, but out of reverence. People didn't come because it was safe. They came because it was sacred. No schedules, No productions. Just worship that tore the air open. Just truth, raw and unpolished. Just people who knew that he was among them. America bent. Not under bombs, but under conviction. Not from threat, but from the weight of love remembered. I saw crowds fall to their knees in parks. I saw police officers laying down weapons to wash the feet of strangers. I saw businessmen emptying bank accounts to build altars. I saw politicians weep behind podiums because truth had finally touched their bones. It wasn't a revival of noise. It was a revival of awe. There were no superstars, only servants, no celebrities, only children returning to the Father's arms. They were chosen, and I wept, not because I feared for what was lost, but because I hoped for what was being born. This was the beginning of the great return, not to tradition, not to culture, but to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. He called my name in the dark, and now he is calling yours, not with wrath, but with tears, not to destroy, but to awaken, because what's coming cannot be stopped, but it can be welcomed, if you are willing, if you are ready. They were chosen, and so are you. I returned like a man torn from the veil, not by choice, but by command. One moment I was standing in the presence of Jesus, burning with revelation, beholding the destiny of a nation. The next, I was gasping. The weight of breath slammed back into my chest like a wave of bricks. My eyes flew open to fluorescent lights, harsh, cold, unfamiliar. Machines beeped. Hands pressed on my ribs. Voices yelled my name, but not the one he used. I was in a hospital, dry-mouthed, soaked in sweat, heavy with glory, yet chained again to this frail body of clay. A nurse leaned over me with tears on her cheeks. "You were gone," she whispered. 10 minutes. No pulse. We lost you." But I hadn't been lost. No, I had been found. Unmade and remade in the space between heartbeats. At first I didn't speak, not because I couldn't, but because words felt too small, too earthly. The language of this world cannot hold the language of that one. And for days, I said nothing. I stared out windows and wept. I walked the hallways like a stranger among the living. I laid in bed and relived the visions. I heard his voice in the hum of the air conditioning. He called my name in the dark, and I had returned carrying the weight of that voice. But the world was not ready. When I finally shared the testimony, when I gathered my congregation after my recovery, they listened, but their eyes were distant. Some were curious. Most were uncomfortable. A few whispered afterward that I needed rest. "Trauma does strange things," they said. "Maybe you were hallucinating," they suggested. And then came the silence, the kind that speaks louder than rebuke. People stopped calling. Friends crossed the street when they saw me coming. The board met without me. Eventually I was released from duty, a polite phrase for exile. But I wasn't surprised, because I had been warned. They don't want this truth to spread. Not the world, not the systems, not even the churches, especially not the churches, because the truth I carried wasn't sweet. It didn't flatter. It didn't entertain. It refined. It cut. It called for fire. And truth, when it calls for fire, becomes dangerous. My dreams grew darker. Every night I'd wake at 3:33 a.m., heart racing, ears ringing. I'd see flickers of shadows move across the walls. Not demonic caricatures, but presences, entities that understood what I had seen and feared it getting out. Electronics in my home malfunctioned. Lights flickered without cause. My phone wiped itself twice. Emails disappeared. Footsteps echoed where no one walked. I knew. The resistance wasn't paranoia. It was warfare. Because I wasn't just carrying a message. I had become the message. I was a walking contradiction. A priest with fire in his bones. A man who had seen behind the veil and returned with a sword made of story. But this world prefers silence. It prefers neat testimonies, not warnings. It prefers light without heat, truth without cost, grace without groaning. And so I wandered, not aimlessly, but obediently, preaching not in churches, but in coffee shops, in hospitals, in prison chapels, to anyone with ears still open to trembling. And every time I spoke, the air would shift. Some wept, some fled, some stared through me, as if the words pierced too deep to remain comfortable. And still I speak, because the vow still burns, because I saw, because I know. They don't want this truth to spread, but it must, because he called my name in the dark, and I answered, return to the fire, return to the fire, return to the fire. There is a war, not with tanks or drones, not with ballots or banners, but with truth, a war for your soul, and for the soul of this nation. I did not return to frighten you, I returned to wake you, because what is coming is not just political. It is not merely economic or cultural or medical. It is spiritual. It is ancient. It is the culmination of a conflict that began before the foundations of the world. And you, yes you were born into this hour not by chance, but by design. He called my name in the dark, and now he is calling yours. Most churches will fall asleep. They will sing louder to drown out the sound of the shaking. They will preach comfort while the foundations groan. They will trade the oil of intimacy for the applause of crowds. But a remnant, oh, a remnant will stay awake. They will not bow to fear. They will not bend to culture. They will not beg for safety. They will burn, and they will lead. They will be mocked. They will be misunderstood. They will be stripped of their titles, but they will carry heaven in their bones. You were chosen to remember. You were chosen to rise. There is no time to waste. The hourglass is bleeding its last grains. The veil is thinning. The shaking has begun. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. I plead with you not as a priest, but as a man who stood in the courts of eternity and wept for what he saw. Repent. Not with lip service, but with life surrender. Fall to your knees in the quiet of your room. Open the Gospels, not to study, but to encounter. Let the words cut you. Let them wash you. Let them rewire your soul. Fast, not to earn power, but to break agreement with the world. Worship, not for performance, but to pierce the heavens. Obey, even when it costs you comfort, even when no one applauds, especially then. Do not wait for your pastor. Do not wait for your denomination. Do not wait for permission. He is calling you. If you are hearing this, it is because you were chosen to remember. You were born for this hour. You were not made to blend in. You were not made to scroll and nod. You were not made to survive. You were made to burn, to intercede, to stand when others kneel, to compromise. The Spirit is brooding again, hovering over chaos, waiting for the sons and daughters of fire to speak. Speak. What? Weep. Fast. Prophesy. Do not go back to sleep. Do not return to normal. Normal is over. Comfort is a coffin. This is the time to return. Not to religion. Not to culture. But to Christ. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. He called my name in the dark, and I have obeyed. Now, the voice is reaching you. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. This isn't just my story. It's yours. You may not have drowned in a flood. You may not have heard the breath of eternity brush your face. You may not have stood in the presence of Jesus with your soul unraveling in the blaze of his gaze. But the veil is thinner than you think, and he is closer than you know, because this is the hour when everything hidden is being revealed, the hour when the shaking exposes the foundation, the hour when the bride must decide if she is merely dressed or awakened. America will be tested, not by nature alone, not by governments or economies or wars, but by the fire of truth, by the echo of Eden that still rings through our blood. And though judgment trembles at the edge of our days, there is still time. Time to return. Time to weep. Time to rebuild the ancient altars that have long grown cold. Child of dust and glory, you are not too far. You are not too late. He is still calling names in the dark. Still setting bones to rise. Still gathering the remnant from highways and prisons, churches and deserts, cities and villages. He is gathering those who will not sell out. Those who will not back down. Those who know. We are not waiting for revival, we are becoming it. When the veil lifts, there is no going back. No second rehearsals. No hiding behind theology or title or routine. When the veil lifts, all will be seen. The motives, the compromise, the flickers of love that held the line. The future is not sealed, but your choice is the key. Will you burn? Will you tremble and still obey? Will you fast not for miracles but for intimacy? Will you fall in love with his voice again? Or will you return to sleep, lulled by noise and numbed by comfort, until the winds come and find you unrooted? Return to the fire. Return to truth. Return to Christ. Do not wait for another vision. This is it. Do not wait for another messenger. I was not sent for entertainment. I was sent to fulfill a vow, to bleed what I saw so that you would believe what's coming. And even now, as I whisper these words into the dark, I see it, that final image seared into my spirit, the cross, submerged beneath the floodwaters of Texas, half buried, forgotten by the world, and yet, still glowing, not washed away, but witnessing, not defeated, but burning beneath the surface, waiting for a generation to see it again. And remember, he called my name in the dark, and I came back with flame in my mouth. Now the voice calls you. What will you do? Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. If this testimony stirred your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, share it. Subscribe to NDE Tales HQ, where sacred voices rise again. And remember, the time is now. Choose.